Yesterday was an historic and noteworthy day. Hope somebody filmed that for a television. Healthcare reform passed the United States House of Representatives last night, and this week it will be signed into law. Today's program, therefore, couldn't be more timelier. Would you please welcome television host and political commentator Rachel Maddow and Clinton School Director of Public Programs, Nicolai Pippa.
Well, I knew I had that many fans. Did you?
I haven't even done anything.
You didn't have to. You're the 8th most attended event in the Clinton School Speaker Series, and it's at 9 in the morning. So apparently you have a following.
Now, I can tell that for most of you, this is actually just a very, very late night that you've been out partying. I love the standing ovation for the health reform vote in the House. Spectacular. This is just like what everybody told me Arkansas was going to be like.
Exactly. So we're going to have a just kind of a discussion, and then we'll open it up to all of y'all for some questions. I'm sure that there's a couple out there. So we'll start with, where'd you grow up?
I grew up in a little town called Castro Valley, California, which is not very far from San Francisco, but our claim to fame was that it was the hate crimes capital of California. The year that I graduated from high school, it was a little town with an attitude problem.
Any particular interest or extracurricular activities in high school that?
There was a real race issue in my high school and in my town, really, when I was growing up. My town had been a rural, very white area that as the town became a bedroom community for San Francisco, it became both more wealthy and more diverse. The San Francisco Bay Area, a very diverse area. And as the diversity of the region started to make my town more diverse, and as the white majority in town found itself on the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum compared to the new folks, there was just a real back to the future backlash. And so we had, do you remember the group White Aryan Resistance and Tom Metzger, Aryan Nations, all those groups? They used to recruit openly at my high school, these racist skinheads. And so me and my friends, at that point I was just a jock. I didn't,
What was your sport?
Volleyball and basketball and swimming. And me and my friends went to, it's right next to Oakland. We went to Oakland. We started going to the meetings of the anti-racist skinheads. So there's like the white racist skinheads from like Petaluma, and then there's like the anti-racist skinheads from Oakland, and they're a totally integrated group. And they exist only to fight one another. And so we started going to the integrated anti-racist skinhead group meetings in Oakland, and we got them to beat up the racist skinheads. That was my first activism. So that was fun.
Then you went to Stanford.
Then I went to Stanford.
How was that?
Fine.
Good. After Stanford, you had another stint in activism.
Yeah, I realized that I was gay when I was 16 or 17, and at that point it was 1989, 1990, and again, growing up in the Bay Area, I was in my little race war pocket of the Bay Area. But it was the San Francisco Bay Area, and coming out as a gay kid at that time, that's really not only the height of the AIDS epidemic, but the height of the movement in the gay community to fight AIDS and defend itself, defend its lives, by fighting that disease and by fighting the Reagan era of criminal neglect of the nation's needs in terms of fighting AIDS and defending the people who were the communities that were being decimated by it. And so I became an AIDS activist when I was still a teenager. And then sort of approached academia from there on out as a way to build skills that I thought would be useful for me being an activist for the rest of my life. And I hoped that it would not be on AIDS issues for the rest of my life, because, you know, like we all would say at that time, all I want is a cure and all my friends back. But I did a degree in public policy with a concentration in healthcare. I did an honors program in ethics at Stanford, and then I went and I was a member of ACT UP, and part of a lot of AIDS activist organizations. Got involved in AIDS in prisons. California, the biggest prison system in the world at that point, and with a huge proportion of HIV-positive prisoners, none of whom had access when I started working on the issue to any of the AIDS drugs that you could get if you weren't in prison. Just started working on that issue, did my doctoral dissertation on that subject, came back to the United States when I ran out of money in England, where things are more expensive, and thought that, and started working for the ACLU, the National Minority AIDS Council, and other groups to try to work on AIDS in prison and work on health reform and work on these issues that I thought would be the sort of cause of my life. And then I randomly ended up in media.
Well, you kind of skipped over the Rhodes Scholar part.
That was the money that I had before I ran out.
And then you jumped into media. Wasn't it? Tell the story of how you got into radio, because you just kind of happened.
Yeah, it really did just kind of happen. When I was in England and broke and not done with my dissertation. Any grad students here? Are you broke? Are you done with your dissertation? No. All right. So, broke, not done with dissertation, living in England, needing to move home, trying to figure out how I'm going to get this thing done. And I decided that the criteria that I would create in my life so as to make it most likely I would finish my dissertation would be that I would try to be very unhappy. I wanted an atmosphere that was very unpleasant so that I could create this sort of psychological puzzle for myself in which the only way out of the horrible environment I was in was finishing the dissertation. So, I have kind of an Old Testament approach to things.
That's one of the reasons that you were even going to come here, was because you wanted to force yourself to do something which you didn't end up doing.
Yeah, I didn't make that connection, but that's exactly the same thinking.
Well, she was supposed to write a chapter of a book that she's working on, and that was going to be her speech. And luckily for us, she didn't, because now we get to talk about all this other stuff.
That's part of the reason that I don't do speaking engagements, because I find my job very difficult, and I can't really do anything on top of that. But I am supposed to be writing this book. This is a diversion. And I thought, well, A, it's really nice to be asked to go do this thing at the Clinton School. B, I'll be miserable. It'll force me to write this thing that I have to write. I don't want to. But the great news is, as Nikolai said, I failed. Because otherwise we wouldn't be talking about we'd be talking about veterans issues today, which is very important, but probably not what you're all here to spend an hour talking about. So I thought I'd be miserable. My two choices moving back from England, my dad's best friend from the Air Force is a Republican lawyer in Orange County, California. And I thought, that'd be good. And then I had friends who had opened up a bed and breakfast in rural western New England. And I was coming back right at the start of winter, and I thought, well, you know, I don't like the country, I don't want to live in New England, they raise dogs, I don't particularly like dogs, I don't like winter, and perfect. So I went there instead of Orange County, and fell in love both with the place and with the woman who's now my partner, who is here, Susan, who we've been together 11 years. And